This chapter is going to be all about something called stacks, guys. So stacks in SwiftUI allow us to align view components in a certain configuration, whether it's horizontally or left to right, or vertically, where it's like things stacked on top of each other. So let me just go ahead and show you guys some examples of what we're going to be building using stacks in this tutorial. It's going to combine a bunch of different techniques that we've learned up until this point in the bootcamp, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm going to open up this Twitter app I've been showing you guys, and we're going to build out something that looks really similar to this list of users in the app, and we're going to do so using stacks. We're also going to build this like pretty cool looking Spotify UI using stacks as well. So this is going to be an extremely exciting and fun tutorial, guys. It's going to bring a lot of things together and really allow us to start displaying some more complex user interfaces, more similar to what you would see in an actual real life application. So let's go ahead and get started. So as always, we are going to start this off by creating a new file. So let's go over to SwiftUI Bootcamp and create a new file. And it's going to be a SwiftUI view, and we're going to call this stacks tutorial, just like that. And go ahead and hit that resume button and make sure your preview is connected, guys. So we have our hello world showing up here, and everything looks good so far. So let's just replace this hello world text with something like, we're going to be trying to build out this UI right here. So let's just go ahead and like add this first option here with Lando Norris. Phenomenal F1 driver. So we're going to say Lando Norris. And we notice that this text is bolded. So let's just go and say .bold. You don't have to say font weight. SwiftUI also gives you this like bold modifier that just automatically bolds the text. And that looks pretty good, right? But how do we get this full name to show up below that text, right? That's the $1 million question. So what we can do is hold down the command key, and you can click that text and make sure the editor's open for you to do this, and say embed in VStack, okay? And now everything is going to look exactly the same, but what's really cool, guys, is we could copy this, go to a new line and paste it, and boom, our text is now stacked on top of each other vertically in a vertical alignment, right? That's what a VStack is. So let me just go ahead and add some comments here. VStack aligns components vertically. And similar to a VStack, we can also change this V to an H, and it would be something called an HStack, and that is going to stack things horizontally. So that's going to make these two things show up next to each other from left to right. So we could go ahead and copy this guy and just go and say HStack aligns things horizontally. There is one more type of stack, but we're going to be going over that a little bit later. So let's just hit resume on the preview to make sure we're still good to go. And we see that these things are stacked horizontally. So I'm going to change it back to a VStack. And guys, to make sure that they are stacked vertically, make sure that they're contained within those VStack brackets, right? Essentially what these brackets do is saying, hey, everything inside of these brackets for this VStack or vertical stack is going to be stacked on top of each other. So that sort of concept is going to come in handy a little bit later as we start to combine stacks, because in order to get this user interface working, we are going to need to combine both HStacks and VStacks, and SwiftUI allows us to do that, which is absolutely incredible, right? So let's make this look a little bit more like the user interface we're trying to build here. So we're going to change this guy to Lando Norris, and it's not going to be bold. We're going to just have a foreground color of .gray. So that looks pretty good. It's starting to come together piece by piece. Let's now go over, guys, how we can sort of add this circular profile image into the equation here. So let's go ahead and hold down that command button again and click on the VStack, and we're going to say embed in HStack. So now this whole thing is a horizontal stack, but within that horizontal stack, we have this vertical stack. So let's go ahead now and see if we can apply that circular image that we learned how to build in the last video with our images tutorial to this HStack. So go to the top, guys, and the way this works is the things that are at the beginning of the HStack are going to be aligned to the left, and then as you go through it, it's going to put those things to the right of that first view component that you have. So let's just go ahead and see what I mean by that. So I'm going to say image, I'm going to say Black Panther -1. And once again, it's massive. So I want you guys to see if you can actually pause the video right now and resize this image and give it that circular shape so that it looks sort of very similar to this user interface that we're trying to put together here. We learned how to do this in the last video. So if you need to reference that images tutorial file, guys, that's totally okay. I just want you guys to see if you can do that on your own. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and go over how to do that now. We're gonna say .resizable to make sure that we can resize this image. And you see here that these things are now stacked horizontally, right? It's this HStack, and it's like, hey, the image is on the left, and this other thing, which is the VStack, is on the right. So then we're just gonna say like .frame. I think we can make it like 64 by 64, and that's gonna make that look better. And then we can say actually, that before .frame, let's say scale to fill, and then we're gonna say .clip shape is a circle. Oops. Okay, so that looks pretty clean, right? Hats off to you guys if you got that working on your own. If not, that's totally okay. This stuff is confusing. So let's go ahead, guys, and see what would happen if I placed this image after this VStack, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and put it after the VStack. We notice now that the image will be on the right of that vertical stack of text. And obviously that's not what we want. This is just to show you guys how things work within HStacks or VStacks. So for example, if I took this Lando Norris text and put it below this guy, then these two things would flip-flop, right? So with a VStack, what you the stuff you put at the beginning starts at the top, and then it works its way down. With an HStacks, it works its way from left to right. So I'm gonna put this image back right here, and this looks pretty good, right? So now I'm just gonna copy and paste this HStack a couple times. Actually, before we do that, sorry guys, we need to embed this HStack in another VStack, right? So what we have right here represents the cell. This is the user cell or row view, right? You can call it a cell, some people call it a row view, some people call it a cell, doesn't matter. But now we want like a bunch of these things, right? Oops. So I want all of these things to be stacked vertically on top of each other. So I can embed this HStack in another VStack. And now I could, oops, let's copy and paste our comment and put it here. Right now, if I took this whole HStack, which represents my, user cell guy, then I could copy this and paste it multiple times. And we'll see here that we get this vertically stacked list of user cells. And that looks absolutely incredible, guys. So we just combined a bunch of different techniques that we've learned thus far in the course with like creating text components, modifying those text components, creating images and modifying that image. And then we just learned how to place all of those things within stacks to align them in this configuration. And we went over how to embed stacks within each other as well. So that's a lot of stuff coming at you. So I want us to sort of back it up a little bit and break these stacks down a little bit more before we start building any more complex user interfaces. And we're gonna go over a little bit more about how stacks works right now. So let me actually just delete some of these HStack guys. So we only need like 2 things stacked on top of each other. So it's just 2 of them. That gets the point across, right? It's this VStack, and we can comment out this VStack right here. So I I want us to start working with some shapes and go over how to stack those shapes, guys. And we're gonna also learn about a different type of stack that's called a Z-stack. So let's go ahead and create like a rounded rectangle with a corner radius of 20, or let's make it like 10. And then we're gonna give it a fill of color dot pink, and we're gonna give it a frame of 160 by like 80 or 90 or something like that. So this is what you should have on your screen right now. So I want you guys to try to see if you can create a vertical stack of those rectangles. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to do it right now. So I'm just gonna cut this. We can type out VStack. We don't always have to do that command click thing. And I'm just gonna paste this in here twice. And now we have these things stacked vertically on top of each other. So the next stat or thing I want us to go over is how to change the spacing between items on a stack, right? So we notice that we just have this sort of default spacing right now. And let me actually change this second one to a purple color. And you guys notice once again that the second item I put in here is on the bottom and the pink one is on the top. So the order in which you place things does matter. So how do we make the spacing between these two things change? So on the VStack, guys, you could go ahead and open up a parenthesis and you could say spacing, and you could pass in any number you want. So I could say 16, I could say 32, I could say 200, right? And it will apply that spacing between those items. And you guys notice, let me go ahead and put one more item in here, and it's going to space them out just like that. Let me say color.blue just so we get, you know, these things distinguished clearly. And that's sort of how the spacing between items work. And that's something that you use a lot when you're working with stacks. So let me change this back to like, I don't know, 24, right? So that looks pretty smooth. Now, I want us to introduce a new type of stack, guys. So it's going to be something called a Z-stack. So you can imagine, like, what if I wanted to sort of place another box on top of this box right here? So on this first rounded rectangle, I want you guys to go ahead and command click into that and say embed in Z-stack. And let's fix our indentation. And now let me go ahead and copy this one more time, paste it again, and you guys are gonna notice that it looks exactly the same. But let me change the color of this to like color.blue, and you'll notice that, hey, it looks like there's a blue rectangle here, and it's completely ignoring the original one that we had in the stacked first there. And that's because this guy right here, the blue one, is directly on top of that pink one. So let me just go ahead and change the frame of this to maybe like, I don't know, 100 by 50. And you guys will see that it's stacked now on top of the original pink rectangle, or it's sort of like front to back, right? So this Z-stack is sort of like your third dimension, right? So with H and VStacks, we work within a two-dimensional coordinate space. We work within like an XY coordinate system where it's just vertical and horizontal. But then the Z-stack allows things to like add that third dimension, which is what we see here. So I could go ahead and add another rectangle and make it like purple or something. And we could then change the height up to like 50 by 25. So how this is working is that the pink rectangle is at the back, and then the blue rectangle is the next item in the stack, and then the purple rectangle is the third or topmost item in this Z stack, okay? So this is another cool example of how we can embed stacks. So we see that this whole stack is a vertical stack, which is why we have these three rectangles stacked on top of each other. But within that vertical stack, we have this Z stack, which has this like 3D configuration of rectangles stacked on top of each other. So that's really, really cool, guys. So let's go ahead and comment this out. And I want us to jump into another example. I'm going to create something that looks pretty similar to like a bar graph. And the purpose of what I'm doing here is to show you guys how we can apply different alignment configurations to stacks. So I'm going to create an HStack here, and then a rounded rectangle, or we could actually just do rectangle, and I'm going to copy and paste this fill. So uncomment that, copy it, comment it back out, and then paste it right here. So we pretty much just have this rectangle. I'm going to make it a lot taller. So I'm going to say like 300, and the width will be like 100. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is paste this in here like 3 times, or 2 more times. So now I'm going to change the height of this one and this one so that it looks more like a bar graph. So the height here will be 200, and the height here will be 100. So you guys notice that we changed the heights of these things, and that's working nicely. But we want, like I said, we want it to look like a bar graph. So we would want these 2 components here to be aligned to the bottom of the entire frame. So like if I highlight this HStack, we can see that this is the box, or the sort of bounding box for the frame. I want this guy and this guy on the bottom. Well, how do I do that? SwiftUI makes it really easy. So I can go here and say alignment. And don't use the autocomplete, guys. Just type out alignment, and then you can say dot bottom. And that's going to align my components to the bottom of the frame. With an HStack, you could also say dot top, and that would align them to the top of the frame. That's like a reverse bar graph, which is kind of cool. And I think it defaults to center, which is the original configuration that we had. So every stack has that alignment option, but different stacks give you a different set of options. So for example, a VStack has different alignment options than an HStack does. So let's go ahead and see what would happen if we converted this to a VStack. And you guys are going to notice that we get an error. VStack does not have a bottom alignment property. And that's because of the nature of a VStack, right? Since a VStack is stacked vertically, the only options we have are left, center, and right, or leading, center, and trailing. So I'm going to apply a leading option here. And you guys will see that everything looks exactly as it would if I didn't have this alignment property. Okay, so let's actually go ahead and change the width of each item. So I'm gonna make this width like 300, and I'm gonna make this guy 200, and then this guy will be 100. Let's just make this like purple and this guy blue, just to make things stand out a little bit more. So you guys will notice that if I click the ending bracket of the VStack, we see the frame of the VStack here, right? So we notice that everything is aligned to the center, right? So I think you guys should be able to see now why the bottom alignment property doesn't make sense. Like, it's stacked vertically already, so we can't align it to the bottom or the top. We can only pick left, center, or right. So if I go on my VStack and say alignment, and then I can say dot trailing, it will push those things over to the right of the screen. Similarly, I could say dot leading, and it will push these other components to the left side of the, not the screen, but the frame of the VStack. So you guys will notice also that the frame is sort of automatically figured out for us by SwiftUI based on the largest item in the stack, right? So the largest item here is 300 pixels, and that is the width of the frame. And then the height of the frame is also automatically figured out for us by SwiftUI based on the size of each item and the spacing between each element. So if we wanted to, we could add a spacing property here as well. I could space them out a little bit more, and it will automatically adjust the size of the frame, right? This is going to change the height of the frame. So 32, 64, you guys can see that they just start spreading out more and more and more. So that is just another example of how we can modify our stacks, guys. So with all of that information now in hand, let's go ahead and see if we can create this sort of complex user interface that we have with SwiftUI. So my goal is just to get like this section title and then two of these guys right here. that are stacked horizontally. And then we notice that that whole thing is within a vertical stack, right? Because we have the title and then this H stack here. And then each one of these items, it's going to be its own individual stack. So this is going to be pretty complex, but it's going to be a lot of freaking fun. And when you guys see this come to life, I promise you, you're going to freak out and you're going to feel like a ninja coder. So let's go ahead and see if we can get this built, guys. So we are going to break this down step by step, guys, and watch it come to life piece by piece. So we're going to start with this title right here. Okay, so we know how to do that. We're just going to say text your top genres. Right, so that's our text right there. That looks pretty good. And we can see that because we have this text and below it, we have these two items here, we know automatically that we need to embed this in a VStack. So let's go ahead and just cut this, and we're gonna say VStack and paste in that text property. Then we are gonna need to create this horizontal stack of rectangles to start off. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab this rectangle code that we have down here, uncomment it, copy it, comment it back in, and then I'm just going to go here and paste that in. And we notice that that is stacked nicely. Let's change the dimensions of the frame to be like 180 by, let's see, 180 by 90, and that should be pretty good. And let's actually make this, you guys could either make this a rounded rectangle like this and pass in a corner radius of like 10, or you could keep it as a rectangle. So let me just undo that stuff and say dot corner radius 10. It's literally the exact same thing. So that looks pretty good so far, but we need these two things stacked to the left and to the right. So we know that below this text, we need to wrap this rectangle inside of an H stack and create two of them. So I'm going to go here and just cut this with Command X and say HStack, boom, boom. And we're going to make this like, let's see, pink and purple. I like pink and purple. They're fun colors. So now we notice an interesting situation, guys. So actually, before we move forward, we want to change the height of these. So we notice here that the squares are a little bit taller than we have, and maybe a tad bit shorter as well. So let's go ahead and make this like 160 by 160, and maybe make the height like 100. Okay, so that's looking pretty darn smooth to me. And maybe actually make the height like 172, or maybe make it 180. Sorry guys, like this is part of development, guys. You just mess around with values until you get it exactly pixel perfect, right? It's just part of being a coder. So that looks pretty good. But we notice that we want this your top genres guy to be aligned to the left, right? So if we highlight our VStack, we notice that we have this big frame here. It spans the entire width of the screen, but we want the alignment to be leading. So go ahead and see if you guys can figure out how to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you, obviously, and we're going to say alignment is leading, and that's going to move the text over to the leading edge of the frame. Similarly, if we said trailing, I'm sure you guys could imagine what that's going to do. It's going to place it all the way over to the right. So we're going to go here and say leading, and that looks really good. And we're just going to go ahead and make this like bold, guys. So we're just going to go ahead and say dot bold. So that looks pretty good, right? It's coming together nicely. So now we have to get into the difficult stuff, right? So we got to go over how to get this, this title that is going to be on top of this guy. So we know that we're going to use a ZStack, but then we also have this image here that we need to get into the bottom right. And then we got to apply some rotational angle rotation to it to make it look all nice and fancy like Spotify does. And it's actually not going to be that hard. So let's keep going, guys. This is really coming together. I hope you guys are as excited as I am about this stuff, man. This is really cool. You guys learned how to build apps, man. This is dope. So let's go ahead and keep going. So within this rectangle, I'm going to cut it and place it in a ZStack. And now on top of the rectangle, I'm going to add a text component, okay? So I'm gonna go below it because I know that the thing I place below this base component will get put on top of it. And I'm gonna add another text guy. We could literally just copy this and paste it in here. And let's just go ahead and make it say like hip hop. Hip dash hop. Hip dash hop. It would be really stupid if it was called hip dash hop. But anyway, we see that it's in the center of our rectangle. Also, guys, we're going to want to give it a foreground color of .white. That's the first thing we're going to do. So that looks pretty good. It's starting to look somewhat similar to what we have in Spotify. So actually, guys, sorry. Let me bring this more into view. I don't know if you guys could see that or not. That's my bad. I have an ultra wide monitor. So anyway, we want this guy to be placed in the upper left of this. So ZStacks have a bunch of different alignment options, as we're going to see right now. So on this alignment guy for the ZStack, I'm going to go ahead and say .top leading. And it's going to place that hip hop guy right up in the top left. I could also say bottom leading, and it would put it in the bottom left. I could say top trailing, and it would put it in the top right. And then I could also say bottom trailing, and it would put it in the bottom right. But obviously for our purposes, we want it in the top left, which means top leading, okay? So we also now need to get some space from that sort of the edges of this guy. We want it to be like indented a little bit. So SwiftUI gives us this really cool modifier called padding that will apply some padding to this text or whatever view component we want. So I'm just going to go ahead here and say .padding. And you guys are going to notice that it creates like a bigger frame for this text component automatically by using this padding modifier and gets it pretty much exactly within the position that we want it. We are going to do an entire video on the padding modifier. So just keep that there for now, guys. If it doesn't make sense, we're going to go over it more in depth in another video. So don't worry about that for now. So this is really, really starting to come together. Let's go ahead and actually cut this stuff or copy this whole ZStack right here, my bad, and replace this other rectangle with that and make this color .purple. So now we can see that this is really starting to come together, man. Like that's super, super cool, right? We're starting to have an user interface that's pretty similar to Spotify. So now what I want us to do is actually create multiple sort of sections that we have here. So we are going to take this entire VStack and we're going to embed that in a larger VStack that's going to represent all of the stuff that gets stacked on top of each other. So like this is section 1, this would be section 2, this would be section 3. So let's just go ahead and command click on this VStack and say embed in VStack. And then we can copy and paste this sub VStack, or sorry, let's actually keep it there, just copy it and put it below that. And boom, what do you know? Now we have multiple sections. Let's go ahead and add one more. So now we have like 3 sections and you guys would be able to change this stuff. Featured podcast categories. Let's just change that. Featured podcast categories. And what's another one? Browse all, right? And then you guys could give these some other fun colors, like we could make it blue and we could make this guy yellow. And then this could, you know, stay as whatever that is, like pink and purple, right? So this is looking really, really good, guys. And if we want to space these components out a little bit more, like space the sections out a little bit more, as we see that we have here, we just go up to this parent VStack. And when I say parent, guys, that's a term you're going to hear a lot in coding, because we are going to consistently have these sort of parent and children relationships, right? So this is the overall VStack, and this VStack has 3 children right now, and that's each one of these sections, okay? So this would be like child 1, this other section would be child 2, this other section is child 3. So this is the parent, and then these are the children of that parent. So I'm just going to type that out. I'm just going to say parent VStack child 1, and then this would be child 2 or section 2, right? And then this would be child 3 or section 3. And we could go up here and say child 1 or section 1. Whatever you guys want to call it, whatever makes sense in your head. So on this parent VStack, we are going to say spacing, and we could say like 32. Right? And it's going to space them out a little bit more, and that looks absolutely incredible. So you guys were to notice, if I went to one of the children and applied a different some spacing, I said like 64, it would just space out the distance between this text and then this horizontal stack, right? So that's sort of how you can apply custom spacing to different stacks. All right, so now the last piece of the puzzle, right? This is really coming together. We just need to work on how to get this image here, and then how to apply this cool rotational effect to it. And then that's gonna make you guys pretty much like a little mini expert on SwiftUI stacks, right? You can pretty much do anything you want to do with your knowledge of stacks at this point. It just requires a lot of practice and a lot of reps. So let's keep going. So, all right, within this this ZStack, guys, I'm actually going to put this inside of another ZStack. So we have a ZStack within a ZStack. So this is, let's see, which guy is this? Yeah, right, that's this guy. So go ahead and command click into that and say embed in ZStack. And then for this alignment, we're going to say dot bottom trailing. So now this will allow me to go, this is one ZStack, and then outside of this, I can now put another element, which is going to be my image. So I'm going to say image, and then I have this image already downloaded, guys, wrap caviar. Let me see what it's called. Wrap caviar cover. So you guys can literally just go ahead and Google like a Spotify like genre. I did wrap caviar. That's one of my favorite genres. Love hip hop. So we're gonna go back to our what's it called? Stacks tutorial, and I'm gonna say wrap caviar cover. And let's just go ahead and hit resume and see what shows up in there. So we should notice this image showing up, but we're going to need to resize it and reframe it and all of that stuff to get this to work. So let me just actually go ahead and start doing that now. I'm going to say dot resizable dot frame, and I'm going to give it a frame of, I think, 56 by 56. Oops. And just delete the alignment right there. And then I'm also going to say dot scaled to fill, and then below the frame I'm going to clip it. So as you can see, guys, this is pretty much the most common configuration we're going to have with images. We scale it to fill and we clip it to fit the frame that we want. And we see our image showing up there beautifully, guys. So it's in the bottom right hand corner. That is working because we applied this bottom trailing alignment to the ZStack. And before we move on to finishing up the UI with like creating this really cool custom angle feature, I want us to break down the stacks that we have going on here, because the stack arrangement is pretty complex at this point. So let's just go ahead and break it down. So we have this H stack, and each one of these H stacks represents a row of categories, right? So we can see here that this H stack represents this top row of these two categories. It's hip hop and hip hop, pink and purple. But one of them is a Z stack that is embedded within another Z stack. And the other one is just a plain old Z stack. So the reason we applied another ZStack to this section item here, guys, is because we wanted to get that image showing up in the bottom right hand corner. So one ZStack has an alignment of bottom trailing, which is how this image got there in the bottom right hand side. And then the other ZStack has this top leading alignment. So it's this rectangle, and then the text on that rectangle has a top leading alignment, so it goes in the upper left hand corner. So this is just one configuration of how you can get this to work this way. There are a couple other configurations you could do. This is just how I prefer to do it, and it makes the most sense to me. That's just a quick breakdown of how that stuff works, guys. You can see here that this ZStack is just the hip hop in the upper left hand corner. So in order to get that wrap caviar image showing up there, we could literally just go ahead and command click this, embed it in another ZStack, and give this the alignment of bottom trailing, and then we place our image there, and what do you know? And make sure you do it outside of this ZStack, right? So this is one ZStack, and then we're sort of placing another ZStack on top of it. So on top of that, we'll go our image, and that has the bottom trailing alignment. So a cool feature that SwiftUI offers us, guys, to sort of make this a little bit more readable is, let's say I wanted to collapse this sort of ZStack in the code. You can hold down Command and click on the last bracket right there, and you can hit fold, okay? So it folds it up, so it just makes this code a little bit more readable. And if you want to re-expand it, you just double click on that ... or ellipse, and once again, you can just go here and hit fold. So this helps us make a little bit more sense out of what's going on, right? We have this ZStack bottom trailing, and then we have this ZStack that's top leading. That's how we get this rectangle and this hip hop guy, and then this image with wrap caviar shows up down there. So now that we've gone over that, let's go over how to add this finishing touch, which is actually going to be really simple, to give this image like an angular rotation, and then move it over to the right a little bit and clip the image so that it still fits within this category box right here. So guys, I'm going to go here, and after the frame, I'm going to say .rotation effect. And now I can apply any sort of angle that I want, and it will automatically rotate that image for me based on the angle that I provide, as long as it's a value between 0 and 360. So I could say .degrees, and then just give it a number value. So I'm going to say 30 degrees. And you're going to notice that it rotates my image, but it's like clipped in a really weird way. So if you guys delete that clipped option, you're going to notice that it's going to fill the image back out to its original size, or fill it out to fit that frame. But we don't want that, right? We want it to be clipped in this like sort of custom way. So to do that, we're actually going to go after the ZStack, right? This big ZStack with the bottom trailing alignment, and here you're going to say .clipped. And you guys are going to notice that that clips the image on its edges, right? So it's applying that clipped modifier to this whole ZStack. So it's clipping anything that doesn't fit within the frame. And then we notice that that's almost where we want it to be. We also want to push it to the right a little bit. So how do we do that? So we get this offset modifier as well, and we can modify the X and Y position of the view component. So I'm going to go ahead and give it an X modifier of 16 and Y of 0. And that moves our image over to the right by 16 pixels. And guess what, guys? Now we have our app user interface looking exactly how the Spotify user interface looks in the actual iOS App Store. And we just built that shit in like 15 minutes. That's absolutely incredible. So you guys are doing great. SwiftUI is awesome. And I hope you guys think I'm a pretty awesome instructor as well for teaching you guys how to do this stuff. absolutely free. So please make sure you smash that like and subscribe button and help me grow this channel, guys. Appreciate you more than you know. So really quickly, we noticed that this image is actually a little bit bigger on the Spotify app UI. So let's go ahead and change it to 64 by 64. And we notice that this matches up a little bit better. So that looks pretty much pixel perfect. And that's pretty much gonna wrap it up for the Stacks tutorial, guys. We just learned how to do a ton of awesome stuff, and we're gonna keep learning how to build cool shit with SwiftUI before we actually get to developing our first real life application using SwiftUI. So we got a ton of exciting stuff coming in the rest of this bootcamp, guys. Make sure you stick around. Let's keep going.